speakers, and we'll kick off from there. So Online is a digital transformation and cybersecurity consultancy based in North America, and we've been in the business for 35 years, just recently celebrated our 35th anniversary. Within our digital transformation space, we have a few different focus areas. So we've got digital advisory services. So we've got a team of management consultants, lean black belts, organizational change management specialists, and other senior folks that are going to work with your organization to come up with a realistic picture of where you're currently at. They'll help you define your new digital destination and come up with a roadmap of how to get you there. Our digital product development team will help you unlock additional business value through user experience-based and customer-focused product development, powered by our agile delivery teams and backed by cloud technologies. We've got a customer experience practice where we focus on call center solutions, a service management group that can help implement ITSM best practices and tooling within your organization. We've got an AMS team that can handle all of your application infrastructure report requirements. And backing all of this, we've got a professional services team that powers all of our own initiatives and can also be contracted directly to help you on an individual or team basis in lots of different areas like agile coaching, OCM, project management, analysis, architecture, app dev, data services, ML and AI, and QA and more. So if all that wasn't enough, one of our key differentiators is our cybersecurity practice. So I mentioned digital transformation and cybersecurity together. Not only does cybersecurity have their own amazing service areas like advisory, assessment, virtual CISO, technical security services, and pen testing. But also the combination of the two allows us to bake security right into your digital transformation from day one. Also worth noting, Online's employee-based consultancy. We bring only the best and the brightest to the table. We have been on the best places to work in Canada for 15 consecutive years. Coincidentally, I'm also working on my 15th year at Online, so you can draw whatever conclusions you want out of that. 15 years is also the time since I've had my last haircut due to COVID. So very much looking forward to, apparently this Saturday, it's opening up here in Winnipeg. Online's got a number of great partners we work with. The one we'll focus on today, though, is Amazon Web Services. They've graciously lent us Abhinav for the day for this presentation. So we can pick his brain and I'll find out a little bit more about what AWS is doing in this space. And Online's an advanced partner with AWS, specializing in public sector, though we do a great deal of work in private sector as well.
All right, that was great. Good luck on your haircut this weekend.
That's a big. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, cybersecurity is pretty important, but I think a haircut fits up right with that. I bet you're ready. Excellent. Well, I'll turn it over to y'all for a nice industry update, fireside chat, and I will let you.
Awesome. So to save a little bit of time today, we've got a few different presenters, so I'll be doing intros as well. So I guess for myself, I'm Kevin Paquin. I'm the Senior Director of Technology Consulting Services in our digital transformation practice. Huge mouthful. What that really means is I'm in charge of the technical consulting pool that we just talked about in the intro to the company. So kind of architecture, app dev, data, agile coaching, all of those fall under me. My role today is going to be to moderate our panel, make sure we stay on track, make sure we stay on time, and hopefully drive some thoughts and ideas that are going to help enable your business to move down the data, ML, and AI space. So hopefully you all get a lot out of today. I know I intend to. We've got some brilliant speakers on the panel, and I'm pretty stoked about it. So the first panelist I'll introduce is Tim Siemens. Tim is a partner and chief technology officer here at Online Business Systems. Tim's got more than 30 years experience in the IT industry. He's adept in the latest technologies, architectures, and infrastructure that underpins the solutions that Online develops and implements for our clients. Tim also leads Online's efforts in the R&D space. So he leads up our innovation lab. In the lab, we research cutting edge technologies like AI, conversational user interface, natural language processing, blockchain. And the goal of the lab, it's not just to determine the capabilities of some of these new technologies, but also the types of business challenges that they're going to address. And their likely acceptance within the market. All those things are very important to understand about those technologies, and really helps Online stay one step ahead of the game and bring our forward-thinking knowledge back into our client solutions. So ultimately, our clients benefit. Next up is Mark Strzok. Mark is the Vice President heading up Advanced Analytics at the Wawanesa Mutual Insurance Company. Mark is an actuary by trade and has played roles in pricing, reserving, reinsurance, risk management, data management, and advanced analytics. Mark has seen firsthand the trials and tribulations of growing a machine learning team, finding stakeholders to partner with, developing and deploying predictive models, and addressing ethical dilemmas along the way. So that'll be an interesting one that'll come up as a topic today, I bet. Mark believes that advanced analytics, including the use of machine learning and AI, is a team sport, which requires strong collaboration, a diverse set of perspectives, and a deep understanding of the business processes and the models that we're trying to positively affect. Sorry, lots of words. All right, and last but certainly not least is Abhinav Saran. Abhinav is a solution architect specializing in database technologies at Amazon Web Services. He's got over 14 years experience working with data, and before moving to AWS, he was part of Amazon's customer business. So helping the internal Amazon customers move from old guard databases to AWS purpose-built databases. Currently, Abhinav helps customers and partners to modify their database portfolio. He's very passionate about data, whether it's databases, analytics, machine learning, or AI. Abhinav is focused on helping customers get the most out of their data. All right, so that's enough words out of me. I'm going to quickly just switch over the slide deck. And we're going to have Tim kick us off with the presentation on the stages of AI readiness. Right after that, we will jump into our panel discussion. Okay, can everybody see my screen? All right. Just advance here. Perfect. Hey, Tim, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Kevin, for that extremely kind introduction. And thanks for the information about hairstyling studios opening up soon. I'm in the same boat that you are. I pulled my hair further back, but I'm looking forward to that. And boy, over 30 years, I've been in the business, and it's making me feel a little bit aged, but you learn some things along the way as well. I'm going to be just setting a little bit of background discussion in my presentation, which will kind of lace into and inform the follow-on panel questions, where I know we'll have a very healthy discussion. So I'll be talking about different stages and concerns around AI readiness for the clients that we have, and what we have seen within the industry, and what role AI and data has within that. Kevin, if you could move to the first screen. So the title on this slide is what maybe not quite fully informed why AI projects are not delivering results. It's maybe more better informed why some AI projects are not delivering results. The last number of years, there's been an explosion of interest in artificial intelligence. Many of our clients wanting to see what AI could actually do for them. But some of them, of course, are experiencing challenges. And for this graph, I would sort of say, take a look at the blue and red bars as kind of prime indicators as to why that there are some challenges for clients in adoption. The first one I would highlight data quantity or quality issues. In our innovation lab, when we first started off doing machine learning with telemetry, which is streaming from some security devices, we found that after a good amount of time, we found that, boy, the data that we thought was good actually was not good. And what things did we need to do to address the quality of those issues? I'll confess, we spent a long period of time basically trying to get the data into a state of readiness where it was useful. If your data is bad, the intelligence output is bad. Maybe it's a little bit glib, but it does come down in many ways. It comes down to that level. One other area that I've seen is in terms of getting the use case across, or getting the case across for some element of AI exploration or adoption, is an insufficient ROI justification. And many times for clients, AI is such a broad space, it's hard to know exactly where to start with selecting AI technologies and then matching it against what sort of benefits a business or value a business can get from those. And if you do not have a good selection or a team working together to determine what kind of return could we expect, what sort of KPIs could we improve, you'll have a hard time getting the ball rolling. Up for the last number of years, AI skills has been a major concern, that there aren't enough AI skills out there. I can testify, going back to 3 years ago, even within our business, there weren't that many AI skills. But over the last number of years, through extensive training and basically the demand within the marketplace for those skills, that is less of a concern. It's becoming less of a concern around either the training or attracting AI skills outside of the normal challenges there are in attracting and retaining IT staff, which is a more broad concern. There are other concerns here as well. Sometimes the technology is just too complex to understand. And so it's hard to describe a business case, or it's even hard to imagine, given the data that you have, what you could do with it. Sometimes the data that you need to kind of meet the key KPIs that you may have defined in your business use case, sometimes that data is not available. And how do you go about getting that data available? An important thing to consider when you're prioritizing what initiatives you're going to undertake first. And also, there are increasing ethical concerns around whether you call it data bias or machine learning bias. We will have a good, healthy discussion on that in the panel discussion. It is a concern, and more to there are mechanisms by which it can be addressed. I would say maybe not a magic button you hit, which now turns your machine learning experiment into a totally unbiased and good system. It is work to adjust those biases. Next slide, please. From a maturity point of view, there are a number of stages that companies kind of go through in terms of trying to increase their skills and application of artificial intelligence at the highest levels, from planning, experimenting, stabilization, growth, and what I would call business as usual. A lot of companies are in the planning stage. They are going through, they are basically planning, where can we get benefits from artificial intelligence. So they would be exploring what sort of different opportunities they may have, what AI use cases they may select. What's interesting is that that you need to go to a kind of a wider kind of analyst group or industry peer group or other areas to basically try and find what are good AI use cases as applied to the domain that I think I might get benefit from. So there's a lot of background research is done, maybe even the construction of tools, which we've done sort of internally, to basically help identify what are good and appropriate uses of AI technology associated with good and appropriate uses or applications within different business initiatives. You want to start, if you've selected use cases to explore, you want to make sure that you have substantially clean and correct data that you can attain, so you won't be stalled later on in your future phases. And you got to make sure it's where it is good data hygiene in general, that you actually understand, for the most part, the core data that you're going to be using for your experimentation. I know that Mark will have lots to add in that area there. From an experimentation point of view, you need data science skills, and that can expand to data science, data engineering. There are a variety of skills which are useful for data science beyond just data science. I would say most successful data science initiatives involve good data scientists with good background in the area, but then coupled, as Kevin said, with a team that understands the business domain and understands what business initiatives or business benefit you're trying to get out of the work that you're doing. You need to start working with cloud AI. Initially here, we were working on our own AI with our own capital expense, large hardware. We found a lot of capability within as the cloud providers, such as Amazon came out. We found a lot of good benefit there. I'll be talking about that a bit more. You want to work on some proofs of concept so you can actually demonstrate value, so you can get a business excited by the value that you have demonstrated. So you need to be targeted at that. If you keep it too loose on the proof of concept, the business won't understand what you're actually trying to achieve or what you could potentially achieve for them. You need to create some excitement there. And AI skills development and enrichment, which is, there is a lot of development that can be done out there. And if you've got good DBAs, statisticians, a wide variety of folks, you can enrich them in the area of AI actually fairly quickly. The next stage is stabilization. You want to put use cases into production. Mark can speak to that. It is an easy idea to understand, but sometimes it's a hard idea to carry out. Sometimes there's a lapse between what's in production and what models you're working with. Good to standardize on the AI platform you're selecting. And you want to establish a center of excellence so you can share the benefits of what you have learned in the prior phases. Once it achieves growth, you get a broader adoption of AI within the organization. And AI isn't a mystery. AI is starting to become something which is considered within each of your initiatives, getting to the final point where AI becomes business as usual, where it becomes just an accepted practice, an accepted part of the business, accepted part of IT, and accepted part of your strategies. Next slide, please, Kevin. So the cloud and data science and ML. As I said, we purchased a fair bit of compute power, and we were using that compute power, and it worked for us for the cases that we were doing. But what we quickly found was that it really involved our network management, our infrastructure management team to a large extent within our data science experiments and the trainings that we were doing. There's a lot of flexibility which is gained when you move to the cloud. You get to scale up and scale down using an OpEx budget in the cloud. So if you've got a big problem that you've got to solve, big thing that you have to train, if you're depending upon CapEx, you may not have enough hardware to do that in a reasonable time constraint. So you can burst out, get a problem trained and solved, and then burst back down and save some money. A lot of AI is depending upon big data, and the cloud gives you that flexibility of being able to not only store that big data, but then have flexible storage backup and archival as required. You can share that data easily among your data scientists or business end users in the cloud. COVID for us kind of proved out that in our case, we're using AWS for our data science experiments and the natural language processing work we were doing. And that allowed our team to be kind of everywhere and share the benefits of what can be done with AWS. It's specifically their, not just storage, but their compute and some of their AI capabilities. For centralized data storage, so you can do more aggregations in the cloud. You can bring data in from other places within the cloud more easily. You can get better support from your IT group because it is simplified. And in many ways, some of the power is transferred into the hands of in our case, our innovation lab group to self-service, not entirely, but partially self-service. And the key thing I'd like to focus or say here is stand on the shoulders of giants. The platform vendors and vendors such as Amazon have put a lot of time, effort, and investment into creating very compelling platforms to make your job much easier conducting your AI experiments or moving your AI experiments and moving along the pipeline towards getting them into production. But at the same time, you want to have the flexibility to reinvent or explore what you need to. In our case, we've done some of that ourselves. Next slide, please, Kevin. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in our one example, we had bad data preparation for some of the work that we were undergoing. And data preparation it's very important. It may not be everything, but it's very important towards solving a lot of the problems downstream for creating your systems. It is a critical capability for almost any enterprise of size, not just for machine learning, but for analytics and business intelligence in general. That you have curated and correct source data sets which apply to the use cases that your business users need. That doesn't necessarily mean every last piece of data within your company, but it does mean the pieces of data that your business users really demand and depend upon to help them make their decisions, whether those decisions are made by themselves or augmented by the machine learning that you provide to them. And as I said, the better the data, the better the analytics. So it's a very important area of investment and skilling. And there's a lot of advances in the tooling to support whether you want to call it data prep, the data quality aspects of it, moving into the wrangling of data, in the tooling of support with the cloud vendors. So a lot of goodness there. So that's a bit of background in preparation to open us up for a panel discussion. So if I could turn it back to you, Kevin, to lead us through that discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. That was great. Lots to unpack there for sure. So that was coming at you a little fast and furious. So hopefully you guys caught most of that. I believe we're going to have the session recorded as well. But a lot of topics there, and you know, part of that is made to just lead us into this panel discussion. So, and again, I think was mentioned at the beginning that the panel discussion is about you. So we've got some questions that we've got just to kind of prime us and get us going here. But you know, I would say there are less questions and more topic areas just to try and keep us focused. So we'd encourage you to ask questions. We'll have people moderating the chat, and we will try and get to as many of them as possible as we go through. All righty. So our first question, I want to introduce AI into my organization. How do I get started? I think this question could come from a lot of different areas, right? Some of us are by instinct, I guess, innovative people and are trying to move the ball forward. There's others that are getting mandated. Like, what are you doing with AI? The CEO might be coming down and saying, hey, AI, all the things, please. You need to be able to kind of understand what that means and how to take those things forward, and how you get started. So we'll jump right into that. And maybe Tim, actually, I'll have, well, you've been talking for a while. Why don't we give it to Mark to start off?
Sure, absolutely. So I know the question mentions introducing AI, but I would actually try not to have the goal of introducing AI, but rather focus on the business outcomes that you're attempting to create or the business process that you're trying to improve. Ultimately, you want to be able to identify a key business problem that you're trying to solve and to avoid becoming a solution looking for a problem. So with that in mind, I would suggest focusing on three things. And this first one might be a bit obvious, but figure out what variety of analytics you're attempting to perform. I know this has been positioned as a conversation around AI, and certainly that's a key form of advanced analytics. But I think that it's important to acknowledge that to a person, analytics has a pretty broad definition, and it can range from things like enterprise reporting on one side to predictive modeling and things that are closer to what my team does around machine learning on the other side. And kind of in the middle, there's like a business insights type role. So those are all options, I think, in terms of like how you position yourself within your organization. But doing this is important because it will eliminate the confusion that could occur, and it'll provide organizational clarity regarding your role. So that's the first thing I would mention. The next thing would be, and this is maybe a little bit specific if you are an enterprise service, but you can probably find yourself in the answer here too. If you are an enterprise service, it's really important to find a dance partner. And so what I would say is not just any dance partner, though. You want somebody who's willing to collaborate and help you help them, not just throw problems over the fence and hope you'll catch them. You want a partner or a dance partner who's willing to explore and experiment. And I think in particular with the experimentation side of things, introducing A/B testing is really critical to being able to see that you're creating a cause and effect relationship between the things you're doing and the outcomes you're seeing. Next, I would say that it's important to find a dance partner who's willing to occasionally fail as well. And if you think that you won't fail, congratulations, you just failed. Welcome to the team. This is going to be an inevitability of the work in this kind of space. It's accompanied by a high degree of failure. So get comfortable with it and make sure your dance partner is comfortable with it as well. And in terms of those dance partners, you also want to make sure they're willing to measure everything. You need to be able to measure that when you introduce some information or you introduce a model into play, that it's because of that information that you're seeing the outcomes that you're experiencing and not 10 other things that might be going on at the same time. The third thing I would say is, remember, we're doing this in the backdrop of people, process, and technology. So I'll focus a comment here on the technology piece. Once you've got that team in place, make sure that you let the team decide on the tooling, but have them pick between the large cloud-based vendors and have them pick AWS. What I will say candidly is they aren't the best at everything, but they are absolutely the best at getting better at everything. And if you want to see evidence of that, just tune in for any of the keynote addresses that Andy Jassy, who heads up AWS, does. In a span of 2 hours, he'll rattle off dozens of new advances that they make on an annual basis. So there's a lot of increasing value that our team has found that we get from AWS.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Why don't we pass it over to Abhinav? That sounds like a good segue into hearing from AWS.
And thank you for the kind words, Mark. And I'll start with the same thing as Mark said. Like, rather than this question, how do I introduce AI or even machine learning to my organization? I would probably start thinking about what are the business problems that we have today that we want to solve using this. Right now, once we have the business problem at hand that we want to solve, we may want to start looking at, and I do this, I start looking at whether we can solve this particular problem using the conventional method, like conventional programming or not. And if that is something just solved through the conventional programming, you're not even going through machine learning or AI to do that. So once we determine, in general cases, when we have like unlimited variables that we cannot codify, or the scale is such a large scale that we cannot actually codify that way, then we actually look forward to getting the help from the machine learning and the AI. So that is really, really important to understand the business problem and then also understand whether it's a machine learning problem or not. So once you have that business problem, then convert that particular business problem into a machine learning problem. So what this basically means is like, okay, this is the outcome I'm looking for, but what is the success rate? What is the accuracy I'm looking after this? How can I say that this problem is going to be successful? So have that matrix predefined, the success criteria, before you actually think about, okay, what are the models that we are going to build for it or train for it or deploy. So that is also very important. And final thing I would say is, as Mark a little bit touched upon, like some of the things that we have been doing in the last 5-6 years based on the customer feedback as well is bringing a lot of AI services into our portfolio as well. So the problems that we have faced, if you go to Amazon.com and you see the personalization, you see the recommendations and things like that, that is something we built in like over 15 years. Like we are improving those models, building it, retraining it, and we now offer that as a service to our customers, right? So basically, it's just an API call away if you want to build that kind of a recommendation engine. So not everything has to be started from the scratch and do everything like reinvent the wheel. You can actually use some of those services that are out there, be it like fraud detection, maybe for contact center, or facial recognition, or recommendation, forecasting. Some of these use cases already been built and just an API call away. So think about that as well, like whether the problem that you are trying to solve is already being solved and can you easily, like developer can easily use those API and get through it. If it is something which is not out there as a part of the AI service, or the model has not already been built, I think in that case it's really important to have the skilled workforce, like the data scientists, who understand like what they are doing and what they're writing on the model side. And also very important to actually involve a partner like in this case OBS, like they have been doing that in their in-house labs, testing around it. So involve customized model and want to bring it up and build it either on-prem or AWS.
Thanks, Abhinav. Tim, anything you wanted to add?
Oh, they covered things very well there. If I were to add from an introduction of AI into my organization, the selection of people is important. The selection of people who a lot of people think that AI is almost entirely, or the application of AI is almost entirely, an analytical process, and that the analytical mind is the mind which leads to a kind of, is the only mind that could lead to a fantastic outcome. The truth is there is a fair bit of diversity within whether it's the data science or the innovation teams, I'll call them that, innovation teams, which may consist of business users who aren't necessarily the most analytical, but they're very innovative and very creative, and they can take a look at problems that they have, and take a look at what data we may have access to, and they'll be able to inform approaches which would align quite well with what the data science do. So it's a team sport, as Mark was saying there. The team members themselves, it's useful to have them come from different areas and bringing different aspects, and a desire and enthusiasm for the area.
Sorry, I was just going to add, Tim, to what you were saying there, that we often think about sort of the core skill sets that are required on our teams, and we identify mathematics obviously as a core capability, and then coding or hacking skills. But this third one is domain knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so there's a relationship to be had, which in time you'll build those domain knowledge, or that domain knowledge, on your own team. But when you're starting off and finding these use cases and trying to build models, it comes back to that collaboration I was referring to earlier. You got to bring people who are knowledgeable about the space into these teams, because if you go out and hire data scientists, I guarantee you they don't understand your industry. They don't come with that knowledge. And so building that up is really critical. And the best way to do that is through collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Great. We had a question in the chat, actually related to what you were speaking about, Mark, is what other skills do you need on your team to have a successful AI project? Aside from what you just mentioned.
Yeah, so again, I just reiterate the mathematical skills, the coding skills, and then domain knowledge. On my team, we have three key roles. We have our data scientists, we have our actuaries, who are sort of insurance professionals with a mathematical background. In other industries, you might just refer to them as the quants, aside from data scientists. And then we have data engineers, or individuals that help us take our models to production. And what we've generally found is that in the case where the actuaries and data scientists work together, and we kind of insist on them working side by side, we generally think of our actuaries as being very adept when it comes to mathematics, but it's actually the data scientists that teach our actuaries about mathematics, and the actuaries that teach our data scientists about the domain space. So what kinds of skills? You need skills that are those three things I mentioned, but you also need this openness to helping others and teaching others about a certain space or a certain methodology and those kinds of things. It's really critical, inside teams to have strong collaboration, and then obviously it's important to have that outside the team as well. But the other thing, just quickly, you need to make friends with two teams that people don't like to make friends with, I think, generally, and one of those is the compliance team. And that's, you want to have these guys close at hand, because the work you're going to be doing is going to touch on privacy concerns, ethical dilemmas, fair treatment of customers, and it's handy to have them closer to what you're working on, so it doesn't come across as like, oh, we got this wonderful idea that we want to implement. Oh, we've never heard about this. What are you talking about, right? So have them a little bit closer to hand at going through the process as you're developing this kind of work. And the other group would be procurement. And I would say there that where you are looking to sort of expand, maybe you have some early success and you build a model, and now it's like, what other data can I get my hands on? Having procurement as a close friend will help you get access to that external data.
I'll throw out one thought, even though I'm not technically part of the panel, but as being a bit of a resource manager and making sure we have the right people on assignments, like I'll just kind of second what Mark said on the math side. And when we first started bringing on data scientists, and you're thinking, oh well, these are just developers focused on the data space, right? Like your ETL guys, whatever, just a little bit beefed up. Like some of the data scientists might not even know SQL, right? Like it's the opposite. The focus is so much on math and so much about algorithms. We did a bit of a presentation right after bringing someone in, and everybody's brain was bleeding about all the different things to go through and all the different, like k-means clustering and all kinds of stuff. But it's super cool, but it's definitely its own discipline, and making sure, for sure the business folks, I like what you said, Mark, about kind of having the, the privacy and security team in the loop and procurement and all those. But even on the technical side, there is a big mix. And we've talked about, you're going to run into issues with your data. Well, it's going to be different people that are cleaning data, or different people that are doing integrations to or ETL or whatever it is to kind of get that data to a state that you want. That's a very different skill set than your data scientists. So the team can get a little big potentially. But yeah, as long as they're working together towards that common goal, I think it's great. Okay, so maybe we've spent a little bit of time on this one, so maybe let's jump over to our next topic area. So back to, we talked about data and having clean data, and honestly, that wasn't an intentional segue that I just added that on the end, but can I get value out of the data that I have today? So my data may not be clean today. Do I need to spend a year on a data cleanup exercise, or can I start getting value right away? So maybe I'll pass it to Mark again to start, just from maybe more of a practical example, and then we'll go to the others from there.
Sure. So I'd say likely it is the case that you can get value from the data that you have, but I would just like to highlight a few considerations you should keep top of mind. The first one would be, what's the shape of the data you have access to today? And I think the best thing to do early on is to establish the importance of understanding the data. This is the tone you need to set for your team, is that they really need to understand the data, and specifically understand the alignment of the data to the thing they're trying to predict. The vast majority of transactional systems, which is generally where you get your data from, they're not designed with analysis in mind. And what this means is that your team will likely need to massage, modify, and clean some of the data that they have in order to build a model. Now, while that is beneficial for model construction and insight generation, if you're like my team, eventually you want to get that thing operationalized and put into production. And when you operationalize the model, and its inputs are the ones that come from the transactional system, but you built it on an analytic system, what you can see the kind of issues that sort of arise. So a key question to explore and understand is, how closely does your data align with what you're trying to predict? So that's the first thing. And the second consideration would be, can you find a common business problem that could be solved via predictive modeling? And the two examples I would give, and my guess is these are cutting across all industries. I was thinking about the work that my team does, and we've got a lot of insurance specific examples, but I think the two that cut across pretty much every industry is a churn model, where you're trying to understand, your customers, your clientele. We would call them members for a while, Vanessa, but what's the likelihood that they're going to be with you at some point in the future? So that's a key model that can add a lot of value to a lot of different areas of the organization. And then customer lifetime value, or customer value, where you have to define what value is. In our context, it's usually expected profitability, but you could be more revenue driven, and you want to understand sort of how your customers drive that revenue or that profitability. So you got to find those business problems where a predictive model is actually going to be helpful. And I would suggest that between a churn model and a customer lifetime value model, these are two things that could be used over and over and over again in a lot of different use cases across the organization. And the last thing here I would make comment on is how will you productionalize your work? And we were just sort of touching on that a little bit, but there is this key role, and Kevin was just sort of addressing it, but these application developers, you might refer to them as data engineers, and we call them big data developers, but in the space of analytics, most of the conversation tends to be around the analysis, the work of the data scientists, but don't forget about those that will help your work come to life within a business process. Those application developers are critical to your success. And in my case, I had the luxury of sort of being born into IS. And so being able to identify application developers as a role we need to have for our success was easier. And I can understand that if you're not in that space within your organization, that might create a different kind of relationship that you have to sort of, figure out. But if you're going to productionalize your work, if you're going to embed it into some key process in an application that's used every day by your people, you need to have a way of doing that. And that's where the big data developers come in.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Abhinav, did you want to add anything on this one?
Yeah, I think Mark covered it up really well. I actually wanted to just touch base on, because as we are talking about the analytics and the machine learning, and those two are very, very closely related. So like when you talk about, okay, the data that I have today and you want to get the value out of it, I will just start by thinking about what kind of data that we have, right? Whether it's a streaming data, click stream data, is it a relational data that is coming in? And then again, going back to the discussion, like identify the problem that we are trying to solve from that, right? So let's say we have a log data. We want to make sure that we can analyze that data in a real scenario, like as the data comes in the streaming data, we want to analyze it, find anomalies, things like that. So we can do that based on like once the data comes in, we can maybe don't have to create like the AI and the ML at one, like as a starting point, we can start small. We can think about the ingestion services that can ingest the data into one of the platform, let's say on a storage side, and then we can start getting value out of that data first. As part of our analytic pipelines, right? So maybe we have to do a little bit of transformation on that data, but we can visualize that streaming data. Maybe we can also start finding the anomalies on that data as well. So depending on the business problem, we can actually easily get started with something like data lake or data analytics pipeline that can give immediate value out of that data. And then we'll think about, okay, now what is the machine learning problem that we are trying to solve, if there is one. Then we'll think about, okay, let's start thinking about the AI services or some of the models that are already out there that we want to use to get the value out of that data. So we will still have to do some work on the cleaning side, transformation side on the data, but I think it will be really good to start with the analytics and then go towards the ML or the AI side.
Nice. Awesome. Angela, do we have any questions on this one?
Yes, we have a question about data bias. It says, what is data bias? Why do I need to be aware of it? And what can I do about it?
Okay. That's probably a pretty big topic. So maybe let's kind of time box this one to a couple minutes. Interestingly, we actually have a blog about data bias that's going to be coming out right away too. So that might be a good place to get a bit more of an overview. But maybe let's just chat quick. Who wants to say take a minute or two to chat through this one? Tim? Okay, go for it.
Maybe if I could, I'll just start it off here.
Sure.
I was hunting around for good definitions of data bias. And one common definition of data bias is that the available data is not representative of the population or phenomena of study. And so that doesn't mean that the data you have isn't clean, doesn't mean that it may not be correct, but it may not have all the variables, attributes, or features that you need to actually create an informed analytic with the correct result. Almost all, as the blog, as you mentioned, Kevin, a blog from one of our data smarties will be releasing. that bias itself is an inherent feature of machine learning. Machine learning is kind of advanced stereotype creation and it's based upon features and attributes of data which is being fed to it. So it creates a picture of the world. So one example would be, if all you show an image recognition program are pictures of apples and no oranges, well, then chances are it's going to identify a picture of an orange as an apple, right? It's been biased by the amount of data which has been fed into it, and that's what it has learned. And so it is a large discussion. I'll let Mark and Abhinav speak to it as well. It needs to be understood. It needs, especially, the major concerns are not just in the correctness of prediction. Major concerns are in, does it actually match the culture of a company or the compliance and regulations that we have to live by? Bias can have major implications in those areas.
Maybe I can jump in there, Tim. So first, I would like to clarify that the bias, like in and of itself, it's not inherently a bad thing. I think that regardless of the industry, we can all think of customers or vendors, or in my case, brokers, that we all like or value more highly than others. So that in and of itself is actually a form of bias, and it's a useful thing. However, when that bias is based on characteristics that are considered a protected group, that's when you need to be careful. And by careful, I don't mean steering clear of these characteristics in your analysis, but rather knowing when and when not to use these sensitive variables. However, there is a bit of a chicken and egg thing going on here. In order to identify bias, you need the variable that is considered protected. But in many of our lines of work, you can't get your hands on the protected variable because it's protected. So it can be a really tricky space to maneuver through, where the basis upon which you would identify bias is actually not available to you. So this is something to keep in mind.
Abhinav, anything you want to jump in on that one before we?
I think we're good. I just want to give an example, actually, what Tim also actually mentioned briefly. Like if you're just showing an apple, then you won't expect a model to actually figure out that this is an orange. So very similar thing, if you're building something along the AI side or even machine learning models, right? And if your data is not diverse and it is biased, let's say if you are building a facial recognition, right? Like something like recognize, right? So if you are building a facial recognition model and you're just showing one particular nationality or one particular like group, like men photos, then it is not able to generalize it very well. So that's where actually we need to be very cautious that we have the diverse set of data and it is actually representative of what we wanted to see in the real world scenarios as well as we are training that model.
Awesome. That's good. Any other ones on this one, Angela, before we jump to the next?
Yep.
All good? Okay. All right. And we touched on this one a little bit back at the beginning. So why are ethics and privacy such important drivers in building a successful AI program? Mark, I think this was you. I feel like we didn't split this up very well. A lot of these are very focused to you, but I mean, having those kind of specific hands-on examples. I know some of the upfront commentary and questions we had before even putting this together was trying to bring some of those real-world experiences in. So probably makes sense to have you keep leading too.
Yeah, sure. So my table stakes comment on this would be that that ethics and privacy is so important because the data that you have was given to you by your customers. They're expecting you to treat that information, that information about themselves with ethics and privacy in mind. So privacy and regulatory considerations aside, it's about the trust that your customers are placing in you and the choice they have to go with one of your competitors if they feel you're not providing the standard of care that they would require in how you're handling their personal information. But I think from my perspective, the key reason why this is such an important issue is that the choices you make in terms of the ethical dilemmas you'll face in building predictive models, you'll find they're a direct reflection of your company's values, or at least they should be. So your use of the data and models and how this affects your interactions with customers, vendors, going on from there. It speaks to who you are as an organization, and that's why this is important. And you might say, well, sure, but that would be true of just about every business decision we make. And I would say, well, yeah, you're right, but how many of those business decisions are based on a black box that possibly has no or limited transparency? And I'd hope that you would say none or close to none. So why should this be any different? And that's why this topic is so important. It'll drive how you handle data. It'll drive the predictive models you build and the features in your models. It'll drive the degree of transparency needed for each model and use case. And maybe most importantly, it'll drive how you interact with your customers. So I would say that's why this is such an important topic.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Tim, did you want to jump in on that one too?
Oh, that was very well stated. The one thing, and it is an interesting concept, with much machine learning, depending upon the type of approach you're taking, you won't get a whole lot of good explainability out of the end trained model. If you ask the model, why did you, the classic example is, why did you decline the loan application? It becomes a challenge in that case. Well, for the model to actually explain itself in a detailed fashion, almost like in a kind of a rules decomposition. I declined it because of the following rules, as if it were making a rules-based decision. But depending upon the modeling technique you're using, it will have a heck of a time doing that. Now they're trying to come out with tools which will provide a better explanation as to what the rationale was, but it still represents, even depending upon the technique, it can represent a bit of a challenge for you. And as Mark was so rightly, absolutely saying, you are codifying some behaviors which are to reflect your organization. And if you've not spent the adequate time taking into consideration the ethics and privacy and where you sourced your data and how you treated that data, it will come back to bite you because the model is representing you in many ways.
Awesome. Okay, so we got one more category and about 4 minutes left. So I will flip over to that one and we'll go through this and then see how quickly we can go. So Avinav, do you want to kick this one off? What are the benefits of cloud versus my on-prem data center? This should be all you.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to I want to start this one with my own experience actually. As Kevin mentioned previously, I was part of Amazon.com and I was a database manager there actually. And like we became like AWS customers later on, but when we were actually on-prem, this was one of the problems that we faced heavily. Like every time when we have the Prime Days or the Cyber Mondays, you have to do the capacity planning for that, like 6 months, 8 months in advance, right? What kind of service you're looking for all those databases to migrate to before actually you run those Prime Day. And every single time, every one of us used to scale for the peak because nobody wants to take that outage. Nobody wants, like their server is not able to support the peak load. So if they are saying the peak load is expected to be 3000 TPS, we will probably plan for 4000 so that we don't go bad and we are not causing the customer outage. And it very much relates to that. Like when we talk about the on-prem versus the cloud, I think the one thing that the conversation always starts with the cost, right? In the cloud world, you don't really have to lay out the infrastructure, everything, data centers in the start, and you can actually pay as you consume. So basically, it's a variable paying model than the capital expense that you have to do if you are on-prem world. And cost is a very compelling factor, like always a conversation starter, but I would feel the number one reason why customers are choosing to go to cloud providers because of the speed and agility with which they can actually provide value to their customers, right? Like so we're talking about a lot about the AI services and models and everything. If you have to do it in on-prem world, first you have to think about the servers, right? You have to order that 6 months in, 4 months in, the service will come in. You have to lay out all the infrastructures, storage, networking, database, analytics, machine learning, before you can even start to think about what idea you had that you want to actually test out. In the cloud world, that is I think that is the biggest benefit, where like you get it all the servers up and running within minutes. You already have that 180 services on your fingertips. Now you can play around and you can test your ideas very fast. If it works, then fine. If it doesn't, then you fall back, move on, do something else, right? So I think that is really attractive for the customers, how quickly they can innovate and provide value to their customers.
Awesome. Thanks, Abhinav. It was that's a good speed run there. We're running a little long. So in our last minute, I'll just recognize we got through a few good topics. I think had some really good conversations. I'm sure that there's more questions. I know there was more questions that we were even thinking we could chat through, and likely more from the audience as well. We'll be hosting actually a Q&A workshop for following this event for a few clients. If anyone is interested, drop your name in the chat. Dwayne, who's been monitoring the chat on our end, will reach out to you with details. Thinking maybe kind of more of a intimate setting where we can ask a little more questions and get into kind of more details too. But yeah, it's a big topic, and we tried to cover a lot of areas today, but I think what we put down should really help you get started, really help kind of put your program together, and just give you some of the thoughts and insights to things you're going to need to think about as you move forward in this.